Nina, welcome to the Queer Divorce Club.
Thank you so much, Tara. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so excited to talk with you today about queer divorce and the different emotions that we have as LGBTQ people as we leave divorce and the hurdles we might face in divorce. It's going to be
Absolutely.
one of those exciting conversations.
I hope so.
It
Okay.
will be. It will be.
Okay.
Can you get us started with a little glimpse of your background with divorce and working with queer couples?
Sure. So I retired from Kaiser Permanente, which is a health HMO, about a year ago. And I had worked there for about 30 years in addiction treatment in the psychiatry department. And as I was getting towards retirement, and then after retirement, I started working more with couples and with divorce. So it's been a few years that I've been working with divorce, both with straight couples, queer, non-queer, um, gay and lesbian, and transgender. And I've had parties with both. My work tends to be about parenting plans, a lot of parenting plans, helping people through divorce, and also post-divorce communication, sometimes co-parenting, and especially, people with kids, obviously. I also am part of a group. I'm on the board of a collaborative divorce, Golden Gate, which is a collaborative process for divorce where I work as a coach, as a mental health provider, coaching the parties, either both or one of the parties. And they also have attorneys and financial, and we work together as a team to support the couple that's divorcing the family. And I also do discernment counseling, which is a process for couples who are on the brink of divorce, but they're still not sure. And I can talk more about that. Um, so yeah, that's kind of where
Collaborative,
I am.
yeah, collaborative divorce. I'm intrigued in that process. Is it a group of psychologists that are working together, or is it um, attorneys and financial and psychologists and all of those type of people in a group?
Yeah, so each person has their own attorney. There's one financial for both, who's a neutral, and oftentimes one coach for both, or sometimes each party has a coach.
Mm.
And then there can also be a child specialist in addition. There can be other professionals that are brought in, but that's the basic team. And we work as a team where we're pretty transparent. We support the family to have as, I don't know, comfortable, peaceful, um, non-contentious divorce as possible.
Mm.
And so the attorneys we're all specially trained in this process and
Okay.
working together. And if the couple, what we call it, falls out, if they don't reach an agreement through this process on any part of it, all of it or any of it, um, they can still go to court, but we don't go with them. So they
Mm.
have to get new professionals. And so it
Mhm.
kind of is a little bit of a motivation to like get a decision together.
Yeah.
And also, but if people really can't, then we do help them make that transition to other professionals as well. And also keeps it very private if we don't go to court, so they can't, ask us what happened, or, try to pin us down on something that people said or whatever. So it's very protective as well of the family.
Oh, there's so many different ways to get divorced. I keep learning about all these different ways. I just use a single attorney. There's mediation, there's non-contested, there's collaborative divorce. It's awesome to hear
Right.
about another kind.
Right. And so
Mhm.
the way that I think about it is it depends on how much support you need. And if you don't need any support, you can do it yourself. Also, I should say, I'm in California, and I really am only familiar with California in
Yeah.
terms of the processes. So I don't really know what they're like in other states, and they can be different. So we have, if you don't need any support, you can sit at the table and figure it out yourself. You can get support on your forms and stuff like that from the courthouse that will help you with that. Um, and if you need, otherwise you can get a mediator help you with things that are sticky and that you're having trouble with. If you need a lot of support and you just feel like you really can't do it yourself, you can get attorneys and go the litigation route. And if you need a lot of support, but you really want to make the decisions yourself, then the team of collaborative is really good. And it's an international movement, actually, the
Hmm.
collaborative movement to help people. It's like, to me, it's peacemaking.
Yeah. Yeah. It does sound like it could. And it gives you an opportunity to work through sort of similar to mediation in a way
It
that
is.
is different, like building out what you want and out of your divorce and thinking more long term and keeping your relationship together. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really similar to mediation, except it's more help.
Mm,
It's just more help
awesome.
than a mediator. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That's it.
Yeah, you bet. Of course.
Do you think through that process and through working with all the couples you work with, do you see queer divorce looking different than straight divorce?
So yeah, I thought about that question, and are some really big differences. Not so much in terms of the process or legally. In California, it's pretty similar. I don't know
Hmm.
if there's any differences. I'm not an attorney to speak to that, but you know, queer people have families of choice. And it's really different than the way that straight people see their marriages. Um, I'm pretty old, so for me, it's a long time of not being able to get married. So, for instance, I've been with my wife for 36 years, and we've been married for 6.
Mm,
So, one thing that we want to consider, like if we were to get divorced, is I don't think we should consider 6 years. Like we need to
yeah.
consider a bigger chunk of time, whatever that might be. We would come together in mediation or collaborative and talk about a larger period of time. And many couples are in that situation where they've been together much longer than they've been married. Um, so that's one piece. Also, people, when it became legal, a lot of queer people rushed out and got married, and they didn't really think about what that meant legally and what their responsibilities were going to be. In divorce, one thing that we think of, the three parts are your assets, support, and how you're going to deal with your children, right? People don't think about that when they're getting married. Well, they don't anyway, because they're like, happy to be getting married. But I do think that a lot of people sort of rushed out and said, let's get married. This is so exciting. We get to get married now. And with no real concept of, what it would mean if they did split up. Because, obviously couples have split up forever. They've been together and split up without the legal protections and responsibilities, I should say, too. And another thing that's really different about queer couples, queer families, is how we get our children. Um, we there's so much more adoption at every age. There's surrogacy. There's assisted reproduction, and there's also more parents. Like a lot of times, couples, it's not just a couple. There's 3 parents, or sometimes there's even 4 parents because of our systems of getting children. So I think that divorce is a way of changing the configuration of your family, and I think that actually queer people understand that better than straight people, because we have already have very creative ways of configuring our families.
Hmm. Yeah,
And then
go ahead. I was
you know
going to
go-
ask you about I want to ask you a little bit about the family configurations because we talk about that a lot in my new relationship and how there's 4 adults now and parenting 3 kids. And before we, entered this space, we knew that we wanted to have a different type of family configuration and a different type of parenting model than just splitting 50-50 and, going from there. And it's work. It takes work to get to
it
a
does.
holistic family system where everybody's working together. But what are you seeing are some ways that queer families are choosing to structure their family or co-parenting structures differently than post-divorce?
I think it's really, you're right. It is a lot more work, but it's also work that I think queer families are a lot more open to and are not just stuck in a rigid mindset. The way that a lot of straight families are more, you know, more rigid. I guess I could say
Mm-hmm.
that might not be true for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think that there is a lot more openness to the new partners over time. A lot of times, not at first. That takes a minute. But there's more openness to new partners. There is more also openness to again, a bigger family structure where, like you said, you have four parents with your three kids, and a lot of, I think, non-queer families would just think of the two parents and then the step parents, and they
Hmm.
would think of them that way as opposed to thinking them all parenting these children. And also because I think that a lot of queer families do have more than two parents to start with. They may have partnered up with maybe maybe women and men have partnered together to have their children. They really think about, like, how is this going to go, and they don't want to take their children away from the other parents. I think more so. um that's you know and then there's also the thing of, like, parentage itself, like, who is a parent?
Hmm.
That can be in question, because I've also had some couples where they one partner either had the children or was pregnant before they got together. And so then they are splitting up and thinking about, is this person a parent or not a parent, because they weren't part of the
Hmm.
decision to have the children.
Right. Yeah.
So, people can resolve that many ways,
Hmm.
with some connection, or sometimes people are so mad that they really fight over it.
Do you
So,
see cases where somebody who may have had a biological child then gets married? They have like maybe a 3-year-old or a 2-year-old, so they've been in the child's life maybe a good amount of their life by the time they get divorced. To say they're married 10 years and get divorced. Do you
yeah.
see situations where sometimes the parent who's not the biological parent getting parenting time, that would have to be up to, of course, the biological parent, right? In the at least
Well,
in.
that's what makes, mediation and collaborative so great, because you can make
Hmm.
those decisions. I mean, you can make them anyway, but it just brings people to, like, what is best for this child? What's best for these children? What's going to support them the most? And I think
Hmm.
that, I mean, maybe I'm just like idealistic, but I think that queer families are able to think about that more easily.
Yeah.
Um, and are able to, really make that decision. Like, I just, think that my child has a relationship with this other parent, whether I'm with them or not, and they should be able to continue that relationship. That's going to be good for them.
Hmm. It really
So,
is best for the kid in the long
yeah,
run, I feel like. I know
right.
my parents were straight and got divorced, and there was very much a lot of that traditional, like my dad only saw us on the weekends and one night a week, and or every other weekend and one night a week, and my mom took care of us and she was the solid parent, whatever. There was never this idea that you can have more than two parents in your life. When I gained a step parent too, it was even like his kids against my mom's kids, and it
Mm,
was never this collaborative experience in any situation. But it's so different now. I think that's part of just what we're learning about what it means to be a parent. But also, I do think you're right that there's a big difference between being able to choose your family, people who have been in polyamorous relationships or in
right.
queer relationships, and understanding that we can all love each other in different ways and open up that space and care for each other more than just two people with one kid.
I really think so. And
Mhm.
I think that straight couples are coming around to that a lot more now as well. But there's just an openness, I think, because we have had to choose our families in a
Mhm.
different way. And we've been, pushed to choose our families by the way that it's set up, that, I think that queer people have just become more creative and more
Yeah,
open.
we've had
So,
to.
yeah,
We've
we've
had
had
to.
to. And then it turns
Yep.
out to be a blessing. So,
Yep.
there you go. Yeah.
That's so true.
Yeah. And,
Hmm.
I really like to think about divorce as changing the configuration of your family, as opposed to breaking up the family or ruining the family, or, tearing it apart. It's like, no, actually, we're changing the configuration and it's going to look different. And we
Hmm.
have to figure out what we want that to look like, and whether we can make it that way or not. Um, Everyone doesn't always agree with everything, But one thing that also we've learned, because I think also like my experience with queer couples is that so many people are like best friends with their exes. Like they still have their exes in, with or without children, they still have their exes in their families many years later. And again, that doesn't always happen right away. A lot of times there's anger and there's, so many feelings that go along
Mm-hmm.
with the beginning of a divorce, whether it's legal divorce or just breaking up or whatever it may be. But over all of the years, it's been like that so many, many times that I think that we have a little bit more of an expectation that that person might stay in our family.
Yeah. It's it's such a stronger like asset-based approach to reconfiguring family. You're not
Right. I mean, you
exploding it.
chose this
Yeah.
person, you loved them.
Mm-hmm.
They're not the devil.
Right. At
You know
one
what I
point
mean?
you loved them and created a family with them and like did this
Exactly.
work with them. Yes.
Exactly.
It is hard when to get through those initial emotions of
Yeah,
that uncoupling though, that
I
messy
know.
first part. It's very
That's such a
hard.
hard part. It really
Hmm.
is. And it's so painful.
Yeah, so
For
painful.
usually for both people, even the person that wants to split up more.
Hmm. Yeah, I
It's
think
still
that's
painful
been
for them.
I think I've had this misnomer, and I don't know if it was because I was the one that asked for the divorce in my relationship specifically, or it's just this is the way our culture thinks about it. But if you've asked for it, like you wanted this, you're gonna, you know, you made
You
the
should be
choice,
happy.
everything's okay, you should be happy. Yeah. No,
But
it's
it's still
hard.
hard. It's
It's
still really
so
hard,
hard.
right?
I
I
still have
know.
grief from being in a relationship with somebody for 15 years and raising kids with them. And, it's a lot. Uncoupling is hard for everybody in the process.
It is.
Hmm.
It
So
is.
true.
And then there's that blame thing, right? So you get
Hmm.
blamed if you're the one that wants the divorce or um and that we just have to move beyond that.
Yeah.
And usually, I don't know if usual is the right word, but many of the times, people can move beyond that. It just takes time.
Yeah. Time and work and healing.
Yeah.
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 Do you think as queer couples specifically, say you were in a queer relationship, then there's emotional and psychological hurdles for sure if you've gone from a straight relationship to coming out as a queer person after being married. I think that's a thing we're seeing a lot more over the last 5 years, growing groups of late bloomer lesbians and people are transitioning after their marriage and stuff like that. But I want to talk specifically about people who are queer couples who were married as a openly queer relationship. Maybe they got married right away when um, marriage became legal, or maybe they've been together for 30 years and got married. Whatever it is, are there specific emotional hurdles that you see for those couples when they decide to get divorced?
Yeah, I think there are some special situations just because, we've had to come out and we had to like tell our families and tell our friends. Like, it's just like there's so much that went into it that it's more than embarrassing,
Yeah.
that this relationship didn't work out. I want to use that word, but that's just like not even enough. But it's kind of devastating in a different way to
Hmm.
say, yeah, I did make this choice to marry this person and be with this person, and it didn't work out. It seems like it's more loaded.
Yeah.
Like, people are so sensitive, I think, after the whole coming out process.
Hmm.
So I think that's the biggest hurdle. Honestly, that's different. I mean,
Yeah.
it's obviously a hurdle for everybody
Hmm.
to split up, and lots of people of every, you know, gender and every sexual orientation and whatever feel shame and feel that they failed, and I really think that we have to move beyond that too.
Hmm.
But I think it's worse in a way for
Yeah.
queer couples.
Yeah. I think that's that you have to stand in yourself in your personal decisions in a different way when you make these choices as a queer couple, right? As the coming out, as going beyond the mainstream, living an authentic life that's not the typical life. And right, there is
Right.
you're right, so much shame in that. So much of this heteronormative training that we have in that too. That so sad that it comes up, even if you have to make the choice to get married and divorce, and then you have to add that extra boundary of, extra barrier, hurdle, whatever you want to call it, all these words.
Mhm. Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
get over it.
Yeah, I think it's just, it takes a lot of courage and a lot of work to
Hmm.
come out and to be your authentic self, as you were saying. And part of that, a lot of times, is saying, and I want to be with this person.
Yeah.
And that is sometimes the catalyst for people coming out.
Hmm.
Not always. And I think in these days, honestly, like, so, I'm in my 60s, so it was pretty different when I was growing up. But I feel that kids, young people, young adults, they do have more support now. They
Yeah.
do. A lot of times their parents are like, "Oh, okay," or "I'm not surprised," or whatever, Whereas you know, when I was young, was like, "What?" Was
Hmm.
just not even. Wasn't part of the social framework.
Yeah. So we move forward in a lot of ways, supporting couples, and now we need to
Yeah,
reframe the idea of that divorce is a choice, not a failure.
yeah,
And especially as a queer person too, like not adding on that additional shame of the fact that you decided to get divorced, because for you it's also a choice, not a failure.
and it's also
Or
hard, and you
hmm.
need support, not
Hmm.
shaming,
Yeah.
not to be judged.
Hmm. I think collectively we need more support for people who are getting divorced across the
Yeah,
board, across the
yeah,
board, for sure.
yeah, and to just understand that it's a very difficult, fraught decision
Hmm.
that people don't make lightly. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know if there's somebody that does make it lightly, but I've never met them yet.
Yeah. I know what would be a light one. I don't know.
I don't know. I don't
Trying to
know.
it's hard for everybody to make that choice. It's true.
I think it is. I mean, I think that
Mhm.
there might be some people that have been married a very short time that just go like, "What did I do? This was really stupid and just didn't make any
Yeah.
sense," or whatever. Like, I guess that could be lightly,
Mhm.
but not. But most people, they just plan to be together forever. That's what they say their vows. They make a promise,
Mhm.
and people take that promise very seriously, and they don't break that promise unless they really feel like they have to.
Mhm. It's so true. It's so true. And oftentimes stay in a marriage longer than they should because they don't want to break that promise. They don't want to.
Right. I totally agree with that. And also not knowing, like being at that precipice, right, for a long time. Like, is there a way we can make this work? Maybe we could.
Mhm.
And not knowing that, at some point you're just going to be like miserable if you stay. It's going to be
Yeah.
terrible.
Yeah. What do you see when you're working with couples that are going through this process of thinking of getting divorced or staying together? What do you see are some signs that they've come to you for because they're realizing that it's maybe time to end their marriage and to grow outside of it?
Um, so some signs, I mean, I really feel that's a personal decision. And, I think that some of the questions that people want to ask themselves are whether they've worked on it. Have they thought about what their part is? I think that a lot of times people come in with a lot of blaming of the other person. Most people, a lot of times, blame each other at that point. Um, I think that, um, you know, I, I actually don't know the answer to that question. Like, what are the external signs? And I
Hmm.
think the internal signs, people have to start to recognize for themselves that they just don't feel like it can work and they've tried really hard.
Yeah.
Um,
How do you do
but,
that? How do you how do you trust yourself and make that decision for yourself?
so that's a great question. One thing that I do is this thing that's like it's only about, oh, I think it's 15 years old. It's called discernment counseling,
Hmm.
and it's a 1 to 5 session process to help people get clarity and confidence in their decision and understand how they got to the point that divorce was on the table. And so you sign up for one session at a time. And during that session, I meet with the people separately I meet with them together a little bit and then separately to kind of see what's going on with them. What are they thinking? What do they think happened? What do they feel is possible? Is it possible to work this out? Is it not possible? Um, and people say many, many different things during that process. Um, and, sometimes it's a process of, usually it's a process where one person's really leaning out of the marriage and the other person's trying to save it. And person who's leaning out of the marriage, especially, sometimes doesn't think that their partner can make the changes that they may need to make in order for them to be happy in the marriage.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the questions that people come with is, I need this person to, get sober, let's say, or I need this person to be more independent, or I need, whatever they may need the other person to do in order to be happier. And then we also talk about what do they need to do? What do they need to do in any relationship that they might be in? So let's say they don't save the marriage and they do get divorced, they're probably going to be with someone else. Are they going to bring the same behaviors to the
Mm-hmm.
next relationship? So we try to identify what are those as well for both people. And then, whether they want to and can change. Sometimes it has to do with, do they have children? A lot of people really try harder if they have children, because they are afraid of hurting them. And, divorce does hurt children. So I think that's fair to be considering that. Children can get through it and we can help them get through it. And as a couple, if you decide to divorce, you can certainly help them get through it, and they can be fine. But it is hard for them too. And they don't get to make the decision. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's fair that couples try harder when they have children.
Yeah.
Um, but sometimes it's just not going to work. So we spend each session, and then each session they decide if they want another session, up to the point of 5 sessions. And at that point, they either have a decision or they keep doing what they're doing for a while, and they can come back and do it again if they want, or they can, if they don't make a decision. So the decision is going to be, at that point, it's either to divorce, to put divorce off the table and work really hard in couples therapy for 6 months,
Mm.
or to keep doing what they're doing. And those are the 3 paths that we talk about in the discernment process.
Okay. So the 3 paths you're saying are, if you're decide you want to stay together, 6 good months, intensive months of couples
Yes.
therapy. Okay. You can
And
also,
we say 6 months because, it's going to go up and down during that period.
yeah.
So we really don't want you saying, like, we had a really bad week, we're splitting up. Like,
Mm-hmm.
no, you signed on to 6 months. Let's see if there can be progress. And if
Mm-hmm.
at the end of that point, you can continue the therapy, or you can decide divorce, or whatever your decision is at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But it
Have
gives
you,
you a chance.
yeah. Have you seen couples going through that 6 month process that have been successful in turning things around?
Yeah, about
Yeah.
40%.
40%? That's a pretty
Mhm.
good percentage.
It's a good
That
percentage.
is a good percentage.
And if they, um, and I think it's 40%. I might have this wrong. I forgot to write this down, but I think 40% decide to work on it, 40% divorce, and 20% just keep doing what they're doing, which
Okay.
is also the right thing to do for many people. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not, no judgment.
Yeah. So keep doing what you're doing means that you're going back to daily life without couples therapy, without, making
Yes.
any big interventions in your relationship and anything like that.
Well, there may
Okay.
be interventions, and sometimes the process of the discernment counseling helps people, make some changes. And so
Mm-hmm.
they may go back to doing what they're doing, so to speak, but tried it in some different way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fair enough. They may have had, some realizations about their own behavior.
Yeah. And I think, do you think in those successful couples that the intensive therapy has to be both are in it to move forward and to change and to grow in order for the relationship to stay together after that?
100%. And that's why, the discernment process is really helpful for couples who are on the brink of divorce, because if you go to couples therapy and both people aren't in it, it's not going to work. It's not going to
Yeah.
be effective.
Yeah.
And so it really brings that question. It calls the question. It's like, are you both going to be in it? Because if they aren't, and one of the things that we do at the end of the discernment process, if at any point they decide they want to go to the couples therapy and work on it, is what we call a personal agenda for change.
Okay.
So they actually write down a personal agenda for what they want to change about themselves. And they're going to bring that into the couples therapy and be totally engaged. If they're not totally engaged, then I've failed
Yeah.
because that is the point of the discernment if they're going to go that path.
Mm-hmm.
And if they go the divorce path, then we hope that the discernment will help them have a more peaceful and more I don't know what the word is, settled
Mm-hmm.
divorce, that they've come to it, they understand what happened, they understand where they're going with it, and they're not so devastated. And I mean, they still might be, but they're they've come to a different place with it. Let's put it
Right.
that
It's
way.
less of a surprise for somebody, or
Yeah,
it's not happening just because there was this huge incident or,
right.
whatever. Okay.
And they can see that the partner that wanted the divorce more worked on it and thought about it and put effort into, like, wait, can we do this, or can we save this marriage?
Yeah.
And that helps too, I think, is sometimes people feel like, this person just threw me away, which
Mm-hmm.
is really not really the case. I
Right.
don't want to say ever, but hardly ever.
Right. It seems like in most cases, if that was the case, then there's some psychological or mental health issue going on where somebody can just let somebody go out of a relationship. It's like not human nature. It's not our ability as humans to be able to do that.
Yeah, it might look like that though. It might look like that. Like, let's say one person has an affair, or and that happens frequently, that someone has an affair and then they say, yeah, I don't want to be in this marriage. Then the person can feel very thrown away, but it didn't come out of nowhere.
Right.
That's a part they may or may not get to work on if there's a divorce at that point. But the reality is that it didn't come out of nowhere.
Yeah. I think there's this idea too. I was just thinking about as you were talking about it. There was a lot of times where I know in my relationship where one of us would be like trying to convince the other one to change enough for the other person, right? And so like be going through this process of like we really love each other. We know we need to stay together for the kids, and we try to stay together for each other. But then there might be a point where I'm like, he needs to change for me. He needs to fix this for me. And then he's like, she needs to fix this for me. And it seems like in
Yeah.
those cases, you can never fix the other person enough for your relationship, right? They have to be in it for
They
you
have to
both
come to
to.
that themselves. And,
Yeah.
you can talk to them about it. And,
Hmm.
it's just like, I worked in addictions for a very long time, and people want their partner to quit drinking or using. And they can be pretty naggy about it and try a lot of different things, try to convince them. And I think those things, they're normal too. Like, of course, you're going to try to convince them to change. And if they come to it, then they might change. That might happen. But there is a point where you're kind of just spinning your wheels
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
the person's not there. So whatever the reason is, whatever the change you want them to make,
Hmm. I
they
think
have they have to
it's,
want to. Change is hard,
it is so hard.
right?
It's so hard. And you have to have a reason to want to, right? Right.
Right. You have to be motivated. And
Hmm.
and that's where couples think that they should be the motivation for the other person to change.
Right.
But it's more complicated than that.
Ooh, yeah. I'm not enough of motivation for you to change, then why am I in this marriage kind of idea of I felt that. I felt that.
Of
I think that's a
course.
typical a
I think
typical
that's
feeling.
really normal that we do
Hmm.
feel that. It's oftentimes that we feel that, but it's much more complicated because the change that we're at. I mean, when we want to change for ourselves, we have trouble with it.
Yeah.
Like, just like, why you want to lose weight, you want to go to the gym, you want to, stop, you get off your phone more, you want to, be nicer to your kids, you want to, like, all the different things, like, I'm just like saying, like, kind of little things that
Yeah.
many people want to do, and we don't succeed.
Yeah. Yep.
Right.
I mean, I've been trying to start a daily meditation practice for years, and I've probably done it like 6 times in there. It's hard
Great
to
example.
do
Great
that for
example.
myself.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Right. And so what, so you have to like understand that for all of us, little changes and big changes are really hard. And we have to be pretty motivated.
Hmm.
And, sometimes it just clicks in and we're able to do it, but we don't really sometimes understand why.
Yeah. So if a couple's going through the process and they're now making the decision to uncouple,
Yes.
how would you help them in the first few steps of the process, or what would the first few steps of the process be for them?
So, obviously they would need to tell each other. That might be first, or maybe they would consult an attorney to just find out like what would it be like, what would it look like. Um, there's a thing called divorce options, and I recommend that people, if you're in this position of considering divorce, that you go to the website divorceoptions.org, and there are free on Zoom. It's not in every state, but it's in many places in California, and it's also in some other states. We volunteers like myself usually come as a team. I do it with a lawyer and a financial person, and not just me, but many people do this, and walk you through what is required in divorce, what the legal requirements are, some of the emotional things, some of the things about the kids, your divorce processes. So again, like I said at the beginning, like do it yourself, mediation, traditional representation, collaborative divorce. Those are the processes that we talk about, and what do they look like, and why would you choose one of them, so that you can help you think about your choices.
Hmm.
um, excuse me. um, Getting support from the people that you feel the closest to. Sometimes it's helpful to, at the very beginning, check with your partner about who you're going to talk to about it, so that it doesn't become a big gossipy thing around, that you choose carefully, like I'm going to talk to my sister or my best friend, or I'm going to talk to whatever, and get that agreement that those are the people you're going to talk to begin with. um, you want to make the process as least contentious as possible. I don't think that said that very well, but
Hmm.
as peaceful as process as possible. You want to keep your relationships with your friends and family. And if you have children, um, number one is protecting the children. And that's the most important thing that you're going to do. Remember that this is someone you chose, like we said before. This is not your enemy.
Hmm.
This is not the devil. Um, Give them respect and care as you go through this process. Remember what you loved about them and why you chose them. And so, you might go to the divorce options workshop. Again, it's on Zoom and it's free. It's like a 3 hour thing, 2 to 3 hours of like understanding how to do divorce, but then also getting your support wherever you need to get support, and talking with each other about it as much as possible. It's great if both of you can go to the divorce options. And if you're not in a state that offers it, you could still go to it, but you have to really speak to a lawyer in your state
Sure.
about the process, because it might be different, but probably going to be a lot the same, but there might be differences that are really important. Um,
That
and
sounds like a
so
great
that's,
resource, a super great resource.
yeah, it is, because a lot of times people
Mhm.
are like, I want to go to an attorney, but I don't want to pay, $300 to $500 to find out what my options are.
Yeah.
And so that gives you a little bit of an overview of the process and some ways to start thinking about the process. There may be something in your state as well. I think it's the Secretary of State in California. It may be in other places as well, where they have information online that you can look up. Be careful when looking online that it's A, your state, and B, that it's current.
Hmm.
It's one of my gripes about looking stuff up online, is that a lot of things are not dated. So you might be looking at something from 10 years ago and you have no way of knowing, and the laws may have changed.
That's very true. I
Um,
do know that we have in Michigan a way to get divorced in Michigan too, and it's a .gov site. I could put that in the show notes too, but I think
yeah,
there are, I'm sure other states have these, but you're right. You have to make sure that it's a state resource or our, friend of the court resource or county clerk
right,
resource or whatever.
right, right.
Hmm.
And then they'll have the forms and tell you more information usually on that website as well.
Hmm.
But you probably will want at least a consultation with a lawyer, even if you're to do it yourself, to make sure you're doing it correctly. And if you have nothing, like if you don't own anything, you don't have any financial assets, you don't have any retirement plans, you don't have any children, you're going to be more likely to be able to do it yourself. But as soon as you start to throw in some complications, like I have a retirement plan, or I get RSUs, or I get stock options, or I own a home, or I owned a home before we were together, but now we've been paying the mortgage together. Like
Hmm.
it starts to get a little bit more complicated, and you probably need help.
Yeah.
And
Uh,
for most people, it's a little bit more complicated. And of course, with children in California, you need to say how you're going to share your children. Um, so I don't like to personally talk about custody because I don't feel like we own them, but I like to talk about how we're going to share care of them,
mm,
um, and decisions about them and where they're going to be. And that's another thing that I do want to mention is how do you tell your children?
yes,
Because
please.
that's super important.
Hmm.
And children remember how they were told. Um, Children of all ages remember how they were told, and it's really important to them. So, what we recommend is that you tell them together, that you talk about it in advance so that you figure out who's going to say what and how you're going to tell them, that you tell them something extremely non blaming, that you say that you worked on it and it's been really hard, and that you really loved each other, but you're not going to live together anymore, but you're still going to be their parents,
Hmm.
and that you're still going to love them, and that you're both going to love them, and you're both going to take care of them. If there's three of you, all of you, or however many of you there is, and that you want them to have a good relationship with their other parent, and that is super important, and that they're always going to have that, and that parents don't divorce their children. So that's never going to happen. And it's also not their fault. And
Yeah.
it's really important to tell them, really, like maybe multiple times, they didn't cause it and they can't fix it.
Hmm.
And it's not their fault and it's not about them. And that you both still really love them and you're still going to, you know, be their parents. And then the other thing that kids really want to know is like the nuts and bolts. Will they be able to still go to the same school? Will they be moving? Will they have two homes? Where will they be? Any information that you have about what's going to happen with them, they want to know, especially if they're, anywhere between 5 and 30, whatever.
Over
And
5. Yeah.
4 or 5. I mean,
Yeah.
if they're adults or young adults or even teens, they still need to be told really carefully. And you still want to tell them together, and don't tell them any details that someone cheated, or those type of details. They don't need to know. That's adult information. That's between the
Mhm.
two of you. What they just need to know is that you decided you can't make it work anymore.
Yeah.
And that if they are older, sometimes they will ask those questions, and it's really fine to say, I don't want to talk about that's between us, and that's, I mean, I wouldn't say it in these words, but none of your business.
Yeah. They would say Nunya. The kids would say Nunya.
None, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
none, yeah. I don't
Um,
know that I would say that because you want to be a little
yeah.
serious, but
Hmm.
yeah.
And there are some cases when you're telling your kids where maybe one of the couples does not want to tell the kids, does not want to get divorced, does not want to. What do you do in that case?
Well, you do your best to tell them that it would be better for the kids if they were willing to tell them with you.
Mm-hmm.
If they refuse, or if they're incarcerated, or, if they can't, they can't.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, if they can't, they can't, then you do
Hmm.
your best. And then you support that parent when you tell the children and you say, sorry, your other parent won't be able to talk with you about this today.
Yeah.
And maybe they will be able to in the future. They love you and they want everything good for you. And I'm going to support your relationship with them, and they're going to support your relationship with me.
Yeah.
And, hopefully that'll be true. I don't think it's great to lie. If the person's really not going to, then I wouldn't really say anything about that. But um, because we hope that that will change, but you don't need to share that with them. Like if they're not going to be supportive of your relationship with the kids, I wouldn't say that to them. But I would just hope that's going to change.
Right. And can
Uh,
be honest though about the fact that you would be support. I mean,
yes,
you don't have to talk bad about them in the process, even if they didn't want to participate.
exactly. And even if they're incarcerated. So you just think like, okay, so one of your parents is in prison, we're
Mm-hmm.
getting divorced. Um, I want you to know that they love you.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do everything I can to support your relationship with them
Mm-hmm.
because they're still your parent. And,
Yeah.
you don't need to get into any details about, you know, why they're whatever. I don't know what they know
Mm-hmm.
about that piece, but you
Yeah.
still support them no matter what it is, or they have an illness. Sometimes with addiction, that's what we say to children. They have an illness that once they take a drink, they can't stop, and they still really love you, but they can't take care of you right now.
Yeah. Do you think in some of those scenarios, and I know I've seen it, um, with our kids is in with other kids, is that when there's a divorce like that, so say there's a parent who has an addiction or has a mental illness, or maybe there's a parent that didn't choose that's really much more upset, that the kiddo can take on thinking they need to support the other parent.
Oh,
Um,
100%. That happens
yeah.
all the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
a really tricky situation
Mm-hmm.
because you can tell them, and you should tell them that, you're the adults and they don't need to take care of you. And that the other parent, even though they're really devastated right now and they're really struggling, or they're having this problem or that problem or whatever it may be, it's not your job to help them with that.
Yeah.
They're still going to think it is. I mean, I don't think words are going to fix that,
Yeah.
but you can tell them anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And
And you
if
have to
the other
support
parent
them.
even if the other parent who's having the problems can tell them, that would be good too.
Yeah.
But they still may do it. And you just, there's, what are you going to do?
Yeah, hold them in those really hard feelings when they're
Right?
yeah, I
Right?
mean, what else can you
Exactly.
do? It's hard.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And, to just say it's so hard that someone that you love and that loves you is going through this and can't be there for you right now, or
Mhm.
whatever it may be, or if they aren't supporting your relationship, that's tough too. Because they can turn, there's like that parental alienation thing where they can, an angry parent can turn the children against the other parent.
Mm,
And that does happen a fair amount. I think it happens. I don't know. I want to think it happens less than queer relationships. I don't know if that's true.
mhm.
I don't know what the statistics are, but you just do your best to say, well, they love you too. You still support them, even though they're not supporting you.
Yeah. There's so many hard things you have to do in divorce. As you're talking about this,
Right.
that's all I keep thinking is like all of these hard moments. You have to be able to explain it to your kids well. You have to be able to explain it to yourself well. You have to be able to grow yourself through it, through a hard time. If you didn't choose a
Yeah.
divorce, you have to heal through that and do the right thing for your kids. And
Yeah.
it's so much.
It is so much.
It's
It
so
is so much.
much.
But it's
So
doable.
much.
It's more
Mhm.
doable than when you stack it up like that.
I know. It does all feel like that though when you're in the moment sometimes though.
Of
When you're in
course.
that like messy part of the first part of
Yeah.
uncoupling and like trying to dig your way out of this hole. It feels like there's just never gonna end.
It's
It
really
feels.
hard.
Mhm.
And one thing that I think about also with children is about if you had your children when they were first born or when they were babies, which again, a lot of us may have adopted our children when they were older or didn't they didn't come to our family somehow till they were older. But if you did have them when they were really little, and actually even when they are older, like, I just think about, like, oh, they were throwing up all night or they woke up a bazillion times and I'm so exhausted and I just can't do it another minute. But you do. You
Mm-hmm.
do. You go take care. You go clean their bed. You change their sheets. You hold them. You wipe them up. Or maybe they're 8 and they're having, terrible tantrums. And I remember, well, my kids have been variously hard in different ways, but my older son was like maybe 2 or 3 or something like that, and he just like laid down on the sidewalk and said, "I'm not going." Like, okay, now what do I do?
I
Like,
know.
there're just
Mm-hmm.
so many different situations that you deal with your children, and you just do it. You do it
Mm-hmm.
as a parent because you love them and you know they need it, and they um you have to do it. And this is like that too. It's
Yeah.
just the same thing. You do it even though you're exhausted and you're upset and you're scared and you're tired and you're not sure you're doing it right, and
Mm-hmm.
all of that. It's you do it for yourself and you do it for them.
Yeah. And I've also learned, I know in my uh, codependent self has struggled with trying to keep them from feeling the heart of the divorce and trying to
Mm,
keep them from, control the situation as much as possible so they're not hurt by it, right? But they're still grieving the same way we are. But I also like to, and what's helped me get through that and not do that for them and hold them in the sadness and let them have their feelings and all of those things is also thinking about the fact that, we don't know how our life is going to change at any moment, right?
yeah,
We could have added a third kid, we could have lost, forbid, lost a family member, we could have lost jobs, we could have had to move. There's like all of these devastating situations that could potentially happen in a kid's life and that we don't have any control over. And just because I'm the one that made the choice about the divorce, or because we're choosing as parents to make this big change for them, it doesn't mean it's any different, right? Like we can help them through it in the same ways we would if one of their parents was sick or if something happened in another way, or adding a kid. Sometimes adding another sibling is really, really hard for a kiddo.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, 100%. Yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
totally agree. That's a great way to look at it, really, Tara. I really appreciate you thinking about it that way. It's like this is another, they're going to have all those other things. They're going to happen too,
Mm-hmm.
or some permutation.
Mm-hmm.
People don't get through this life unscathed,
Right.
you know, and your kids aren't either, and you can't protect them from everything.
Yeah.
But you can separate your feelings from theirs, which is good,
Yeah.
right? Like they're
Yes.
going through
Yes. Mm-hmm.
something a little bit different than what you're going through.
Mm-hmm.
In some ways easier, in some ways harder.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and just, yeah, like you said, hold them in their feelings and and that's the hard part, like putting ours aside a little bit while
Yeah.
we are holding them, to really hear them and not get it confused with ours because we have a different grief.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. We could talk about co-parenting all day. I have so many questions that I'm gonna ask you
Yeah,
about.
co-parenting is
Yeah.
super important
Mm-hmm.
and can be really challenging.
So,
And
yes.
it's one of the things that that I work on with people a lot, and it changes usually over time as people perhaps get new partners. It changes, and also as the children grow up. What they need when they're 5 is completely different than what they need when they're 15,
Right.
right? It's a whole different story.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to adapt to them.
Yeah, we
And
do. We're always adapting to our kids. It's a lifetime of adaptation,
it
adaptation.
really is. It really is. Yeah.
Mhm.
My kids right now are 26 and 30. It's like completely different, and sometimes harder and sometimes easier,
Right.
because it's all really out of my control, but a lot more out of my control than it was when they were younger, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Can really see that. But you still just want good things for them, and you want to be
Mm-hmm.
close to them, and you want, there's so much that you want.
Yeah. And there's nothing, one thing we are know for sure for all of us is that there's going to be change. We're going to grow in our lives. We're never the same.
Right.
Even no matter who we are, we're never the same
Yeah,
throughout our
that's right.
entire life.
That's so true.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. And they're and
Mhm.
them and us. And we really see it with them, in a
Right.
way that sometimes we don't see it with ourselves as much. Can sneak up on us. That, I
Yes.
was 40 like a minute ago and now I'm like, wait,
Hmm.
what happened? How did that happen?
I
But
know.
and
Uh,
in some ways that's true with them too. Like they were little a minute ago.
mhm. I know. I just sent my oldest off to middle school this morning, and
Oh,
for the first time. And so he's going in this big, huge new school, and he's walking in there, and he's 6 foot tall already. And I'm just
oh
looking at
wow.
him like, oh my goodness, like they get to this spot in their life where he's gone through all of these really hard things over the last 2 years. I mean, in his whole life, that, these hard things that he's been through and ways he's developed. But I'm so proud of him because he's making it there. We were there with
Mm,
all me and my partner and his dad and his brother all cheering him on. It was an
oh, that's
amazing
great.
moment to be able to get to that. I mean, it
Yeah.
takes work on the
Yeah.
kiddos' part and the parents' part, and holding each other through it and getting there. And it's
And
a
those
really
are
good
hard
feeling.
years, those middle school years. They can be
Mm,
really hard.
yeah. Oh, it's
They
going to be a
start to
lot.
get hormones and then
Hmm.
they're getting exposed to all this stuff that you're like, you had no idea about,
Yeah.
you think but it's so different.
Yeah. And you think you went through it, but it's totally different these days. And oh my gosh.
It
It
is,
is.
yeah. I
It
remember
really
my
is.
son saying that, some kid he was talking to in middle school said he hadn't been home for 3 days, like, and that and my son was like, "What does that even mean?"
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, "Yeah, people have really different lives."
Hmm. Oh,
So
they
it's just
do.
they get exposed to stuff that you're like, "Wait, I don't even want him to know about that."
Yeah. But they do
But
learn about it. It's
they
out in the
do,
real
and
world. And
they have your
yeah.
amazing support, so they're
Hmm.
gonna be okay, and you just have to, you know that somehow you're gonna get through any hard parts that are probably gonna crop up.
Yeah, for sure. Um, we have talked about so many things, and I think we've been through, conversations. It's just so much good information. I'm trying to soak it in. So much good. I appreciate it. I'm wondering if you
Oh,
might be
sure.
able to leave listeners with, if you're thinking about, choosing the way you want to get divorced, or developing what your relationship or co-parenting relationship looks like after divorce. What is something that you would say to them that's really important to keep in mind as they do go through that process?
So there's a bunch of stuff I would say. Like one
Yeah.
thing is, if you have children, put them first. And just like you did when they were waking up all night and you had to get up with them, put them first, do the hard thing,
Hmm.
be kind. Um, Remember that you chose this person at one point and that they deserve respect and care. I mean, you're a child too, but the the person that you're divorcing, that they are, just as deserving of respect and care as you are. And
Hmm.
you are deserving of respect and care as well. Get support. Figure out who's going to support you and who's not going to say things that hurt you. Just was in a situation where the friends of quote unquote friends were, are telling bad messages about the soon to be ex spouse to one of the partners. So that's the friend who's saying, "Oh, that this person's doing this and that. I saw it on Facebook and saw it on Instagram or whatever." Like they're doing all these terrible things. Like that is not helpful. That is not a friend. A
Yeah.
friend is the person that says, "We're going to get through this, honey." We're
Hmm.
and comes and sits with you and brings you tea, um, and says, "What do you need and how can I help?"
Hmm.
It's not the person that starts to talk about your ex. It's the person who says, "Can I watch your kids for a little while you go for a walk?" Um, that's the person that offers you the support that really feels supportive and makes you feel better, not
Yeah.
makes you feel worse. And
Hmm.
that, like you were saying about the children, that can hold you in your pain, that you can be yourself with and talk about what, you can talk about how angry you are at your ex, and that doesn't mean they're going to pick up that gauntlet with you.
Right. Ooh. That's really good advice. I was just thinking about the support you need when you go through a divorce and how
Yeah.
it's so important to have at least one solid foundation or somebody secure and safe to go through that with, whether it is somebody that comes to, they don't have to be there for everything for you. They don't do paperwork for you or
Right.
anything else. They need to give you a hug when you're crying, be there to take your kids for you, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually,
Mhm.
that's what's so great about your program here is that people can get support from each other as they're going through divorce. Queer divorce is like, you need specialized support in
Yeah,
a way. You might. You might.
you might. Yeah, our Facebook group is growing online. There's more and more people connecting in there and offering each other. I mean, just sharing stories about what you've been through is so good to
Yeah,
hear from
sometimes
others.
yeah, sometimes it doesn't even have to be a friend that you've had. It can
Hmm.
be other people too. Now
Yeah,
in this age of social media and stuff, like there's ways to get support
yeah.
and to just feel that.
Hmm.
So that I think that's really a fabulous thing that you're doing, and I hope that people take advantage of it.
Me too. If people want to find you or your resources, you mentioned divorceoptions.org. Is there
Mhm.
anywhere else you would send them online?
So collaborative divorce, just Google it,
Hmm.
is a really good resource.
Okay.
If they're interested in discernment counseling, they can Google that, discernment counseling. It has
Hmm.
its own thing. The guy that started his name is Bill Doherty. He's in Minnesota, but he has a whole thing with like a network of people that are on his list.
Hmm.
Um,
Okay.
the collaborative divorce movement, it's also called collaborative process. Wait, um, God, I can't even think. Sorry, I'm losing my brain. Um, the collaborative divorce thing is also international, so it is in your state.
Okay.
And that may be close to you. And the thing that's also really great about it is that even if you don't decide to do a collaborative divorce, getting the attorneys that are on that are trained in collaborative, they're going to be your family law attorneys who are not going to try to light a flame and make your situation worse.
Yeah.
Because that is a problem. I don't know how common it is, but some divorce attorneys, they make more money if they make you fight more.
Right.
And that sucks
Yeah.
for
Not okay.
everybody,
Yeah.
so you don't want that attorney. I
Hmm.
used to say to people like, get a shark. Now I'm like, oh, no, 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 don't get a shark. What was I thinking? No, get a peacemaker.
Yeah.
um but you do find like amazing professionals in that network. So there's an International Academy of Collaborative Professionals, IACP, and they have probably lists of professionals and also just in your state. So
Fabulous.
that's where I would go.
Thank you so much for being here and offering
Yeah,
guidance and how we can create a peaceful divorce and
you're
reconfigure our
welcome.
families in peaceful ways. I appreciate that so much.
Yeah, you're so welcome. And I'm so glad you're doing this as well. So thank you for having me.